People always described him as funny, always had the loudest laugh, always joked around with everybody he knew. He was just the strongest man that I know. My dad was Robert Hoskins. He was born and raised in Chatham-Kent. My mom and dad were married for 52 years. My dad worked for the Ministry of Transportation, making signs on the highway. He loved hockey. That was his most favorite sport. My dad has 5 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. 6.5 years ago, my dad was experiencing some symptoms. So we took him in to emerge that night, and the doctor gave him a CT scan, and it came back that he had a glioblastoma on his right side of his brain. The doctors had given my dad 18 months, but he made it for 6 years. He didn't talk about it very often. He just kept doing his thing, you know. In 2022, my dad was having similar symptoms, so we ended up taking him back to the hospital where they had diagnosed him again with a second tumor at the frontal lobe. As the months went on after that, my dad started to decline, and Mom and I had to make a really, really hard decision. And prior to that, we had taken a tour of Chatham-Kent Hospice. And at that time, I remember leaving hospice, and the very first thing my dad said, "I can't go there, it's too fancy." My dad is like a hunter, a fisherman, you know, like, you know, and came here, and, you know, it's just a beautiful place. He was really, really declining. And so we made that decision to bring my dad to hospice. It took some time to settle in, but the volunteers and the nurses and the PSWs made it quite clear to us that, you know, that we can be wife and we can be daughter now, and we were able to just, you know, be there and spend that quality time with my dad. Being that my dad is a huge Toronto Maple Leaf fan, he had his Toronto Maple Leaf blanket and we had a flag. This caught the attention of one of the volunteers, Mike, who also loved Toronto Maple Leafs and who also played hockey. Mike came up to me and says, "I think I can arrange TJ Brody to come and see your dad." And at first I was like, no, this isn't gonna happen, this isn't real. And so when TJ Brody walked through that door, it was just a feeling that my family and I will never ever forget. And my dad reached up his hand to shake his hand. And prior to this visit, my dad had actually been sleeping for 2 days. There was a time where my daughter graduated grade 8, and she came in her dress and her makeup and her hair was all done. I remember when she entered the room, all my dad's words, all he could say was, "Wow, wow, wow." He just was speechless. The most beautiful thing that I thought that touched us the most was the cuddle bed that they had. It was able to expand out into a queen size that we took full advantage of, and we would crawl in there with my dad, and some days he would think it's funny, and some days he'd be like, "What are you doing?" But we did it anyways. What we appreciated so much was the care and compassion of the nurses and the PSWs and the volunteers. They took the time to come into the room and talk to us, educate us on what was happening to my dad. After my dad passed, we all went into the courtyard. The grandchildren got to say something about my dad or a memory. Each of them got to light a candle and place it into the pond. And it was just a really peaceful way for them to be able to say goodbye to their grandpa. It was just a nice way to end our journey at hospice. When a parent is passing away, coming to hospice, all of our burdens were taken off our shoulder, and we didn't have to think about anything else. it just gave us that little bit of energy to keep going.